All right, we kick things off, of course, with a new report that looks at the number of people on the African continent that are facing food insecurity. It's about 35.3 million, or 9% of analyzed countries, which is about 13 of them. If there's not enough of an intervention, it could rise to 49.5 million across 16 nations. Now, this, of course, is a report that has been put together from the CILS, and that is, of course, the Interstate Committee on Control, Interstate Committee for Drought Control in the Sahel, in collaboration with the Food Security Information Network. We're happy to be joined from Rome by Sara Mchattie. She's the Food Security Information Network Global Coordinator. Sara, I'm really happy that we finally have a chance to talk to you after a couple days of scheduling here. Can you describe the partnership between the CILSS and the FSIN and your organization that produces this annual report?
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's good to be here. So CILS and FSIN has actually been working together for almost a decade. We've been sharing data and collaborating on both the global report on food crisis, which we published in April of this year, but also the report that we published together last year that focuses on West Africa. The core of our partnership is that we're committed to produce data and evidence that's based on consensus, technical rigor, and also bringing together the knowledge of all the partners in West Africa and for the global report around the globe.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
All right. Now, these projections, the plus 35 million from, I think, March through May, up until 45 million if there's not much of an intervention, through June or so. Is that on the low end of the spectrum? That is to say, could these insecurity figures for food be even higher?
It's really hard to say. There's two big factors. One is that we actually don't have data on a number of countries. Cabo Verde, Liberia, Niger, and the Gambia didn't have projections. So we know we do have some data gaps there. But also we have to remember that these numbers are based on the assumption of no action. So if there's no action taken, we could indeed get as high as that. But the key thing to remember as well, the third message, is that these projections are the highest that the CH system, the Cadre Humanisé and CILS, have ever projected for West Africa.
That is troubling. Now, can you talk us through the main contributors to food insecurity that are highlighted in the report?
So globally, there's three main drivers for food insecurity. One is insecurity and conflict itself. Obviously, weather shocks, but also economic shocks. In West Africa, what we see, the main driver is actually insecurity for 5 countries. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Nigeria all have insecurity having a heavy impact on market prices, the ability of farmers to go and farm their fields and people to reprovision their shops. The health status of population goes down, which has a big impact on nutrition and food insecurity. And then the other big shock is obviously the economic shocks. So West Africa and the Sahel are very import dependent for food. We all know the impact of COVID and the war in Ukraine on food prices. And even if food prices are going down globally, it's not manifesting itself at the domestic level. So people who are still procuring food at the local level are finding the prices are still very high. And also government budgets are just overdrawn to be able to cope with those crises. So there isn't a lot of money left in the government coffers to be able to stabilize these food prices and these economic shocks.
All right. Look, it's a really great report. I enjoyed going through it. I still got to dive deeper into it. How do we combat these main contributors to food insecurity? What's the solution here?
This is the biggest challenge of all and the million-dollar question. I think the key message is peace building. If countries have peace, people can recover their livelihoods, markets can become revitalized. If there's access to populations that are in need of assistance, we can meet those immediate humanitarian needs, and governments can put in the investments necessary for people to recover their livelihoods. I think that's really the trickiest piece, but the most important one. And then also just expanding social protection. Food security isn't only about what you eat every day, it's also about knowing what you'll eat next week and next month. So building out these sort of systems so that people know that they can predictably get assistance through those lean seasons, and then they'll be able to assure food access throughout the year. And then I would also say a major issue that we speak about less is just the problem of government debt. There's a number of countries in West Africa that are actually spending more on interest payments on foreign debt than they are on education and healthcare combined. And I think if we can switch that ratio, then we'd really be taking some good steps towards facing food insecurity.
Thanks so much. There's a portion of the report on food availability that I want to highlight for our viewers. It talks about, I think, so it says 2023-24 cereal production in West Africa and the Sahel recorded a slight decline compared with the previous year and an increase of 4% compared with the average over the last 5 years. Lower production compared with the 2022 to 2023 period, mainly attributed to climatic changes and floods, which affected Chad, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Niger, and Nigeria. So does I know the climate issue, of course, is front and center, but does the main responsibility fall on countries in question to produce more food? Can we possibly look to technology to help, especially during lean seasons?
Yeah, so to address the first part of that question, one of the things we're finding more and more at the global level and very much at the regional level as well is that generally availability isn't really the major problem, it's access to that food. So the report has a focus on nutrition and highlights some really alarming figures. The cost of a nutritious diet, so this is a diet to be able to grow and thrive, is about 6 times higher than the cost of an energy-rich diet, the one that just keeps you going day in and day out but isn't nutritionally balanced. And what we found is that less than 1 in 2 children in West Africa can actually afford a nutritious diet, and less than 1 in 5 children are actually meeting that minimum diversity. So the big message coming out here is affordability is the issue, not so much the availability of food. In terms of the technology that can support this, obviously infrastructure investment into production and distribution of food is important, but we also forget these really easy ones, which is to really leverage some of the opportunities, for example, coming out of mobile communication, so that farmers can get market data, for example, know where the prices are high or the prices are low. This is still a challenge in West Africa. And then also having access to climate data. When should you plant? When should you not plant? We have a lot of sophisticated information on projections of rainfall, for example. So being able to communicate that to those who produce food or need to access pasture for their animals means that they don't have to fish around and they can know with certainty when to actually start their activities.
Sarah, I got to ask you about, you mentioned some stats there, 1 in 2 children, 1 in 5, and this cost of nutritious diets and so on and so forth. I got to ask you about fertility rates, right? Here in Nigeria, the last 2 presidents, President Buhari and President Jonathan, have both expressed concerns over Nigeria's population. So we decided to take a look at fertility rates for 2022, according to the World Bank. So 3 countries in your study in sub-Saharan Africa are on this list with the highest fertility rates. So that's, you've got Niger, Chad, and Nigeria. So as far as the fertility rates are concerned, they have some of the highest rates in the world. So does that come into play at all based on the number of children that are being birthed and the stress it could possibly place on a family that's trying to feed them? Does that, or, I guess that's the demand side, or are you just focused on the supply side saying they should be producing enough food regardless of how many children they have?
Yeah, I think it's both, and the 2 increasing populations and agriculture not keeping up is definitely a challenge. But I think, as I said earlier, affordability is really becoming the major driver for food insecurity. But demographic growth has a huge impact not only on agricultural production, but we also have to consider the strain on health services, for example, which is so key to being healthy and being able to digest the food that you even access, or education as well. How many seats are there in schools to actually educate these children, which also leads to improved food insecurity. So definitely a major issue, and definitely broader than just production of food.
Now, just one more question for you. What's, I guess, the main takeaway from the report? Is it a warning or a signal for nations to act as quickly as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the same trends in West Africa as we're seeing globally, that numbers are going up. Part of it is that we're getting better at counting people. So more governments are really investing and looking into food insecurity in their nations. But we're seeing that even as we count more people, we're also seeing the problems spread. So it definitely is becoming a global problem, a regional problem, and a local problem. But also the other key message is the link with conflict and insecurity on food insecurity. So people who are in war zones simply cannot feed themselves or struggle to do so. And I think that's a big message and a big call to everybody to really focus on building that, on peace building, and in doing so, we can start to look at development and humanitarian response.
An incredibly important topic. It's vital to the world. Sara Mchattie, coordinator at the Food Security Information Network. We thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to talk to us about this report. And we encourage everybody to read it. Thank you so much.